Dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Doing well. Looking forward to this conversation about Thanos and the Infinity War that we've been looking forward to for so long. But I'm also looking forward to a conversation that really, by the time listeners are hearing this, happened earlier today or yesterday, probably.
Yeah, I don't really do the time travel thing well, but I believe you're right. First, listeners are going to hear us talk about Thanos, and then they'll hear us talk about the Riddler from the Matt Reeves film, The Batman.
Yeah, as well as the Batman, and as well as maybe Catwoman and Joker. This weekend, for people listening on the weekend of April 1st through 3rd, is the weekend of Wondercon, the very first convention that's happening in person for us in 2 years. So we, by the time you're hearing this, have done a panel on the psychology of the Batman, Matt Reeves' new film, starring Robert Pattinson, obviously. And next weekend, you're going to be hearing that panel, assuming all has gone well.
Again, I don't do time travel well, but I can say right now, it was a fantastic panel.
I'm sure it was. Because it also... we've got a couple of special guests. We've got our good friend London Jackson from the History of the Batman, and we've got another new friend of ours, Hector Navarro from Heroes Reforged, and people might remember him from DC Daily. And we're very much looking forward to that conversation. So I thought I would tease it now because if, again, everything went according to plan, we recorded it and it's going to go up for our listeners next weekend as something of a special treat.
And, something that I do miss is that live crowd. So we'll hopefully have some questions from the audience. We'll have that audio in there as well. We'll have hopefully just the spirit of comic conventions captured in that recording. So that'll be nice.
Yeah. I want to talk about Infinity War, Drea, though, because it's hard to believe our first episode of this MCU saga was how long ago? How long would you say it was? Our first episode, which would have been Iron Man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like when was that? It seems like it was like 2 weeks ago.
It's been 10 years of coverage. Let me rephrase that. We've been covering the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for quite some time, but we've already covered about 10 years of those films. What, 2009 to 2018 almost.
Yeah.
Quite a few films. I don't know. I'm going to take a guess and say at least 6 months.
The very first episode of Iron Man went up June 16th, 2021. Wow. So less than a year ago, and we've already covered 10 years of the MCU.
Well, let me just say too, I don't even understand time anymore, but as long as we've been covering this, we've seen the films. We know everything is leading up to Thanos. Mm-hmm. We've seen some glimpses of Thanos. We've heard a little bit about Thanos. We've heard other characters talk about Thanos. This episode really is about the psychology of this villain / quotes villain. Yeah. We really need to dive into the true motivations of this person and why he did what he did.
So you're saying, just as you did last time, that this, again using quotes, villain might be I don't want to say justified, but you're saying that he has a plan, he has a purpose,
sure.
and it's for more than just his own gain.
I think we will understand it. And like many villains, we will disagree with his actions. And I think that's probably how life is. I am going to call him a villain. Thanos is the villain of the Infinity War and Endgame films. He truly is the person that needs to be stopped.
Yeah.
He is the person that cannot be redeemed. He has already he's already done unfathomable things.
Yeah.
Up till this film, we already know that. So it's not as if we're saying he's an anti-hero or that he's not truly a terrible, horrible person. But I think what we need to better understand is why is he doing what he's doing, and why is this villain not simply a quote bad person doing bad things?
Yeah.
That's actually not who he is.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Again, I know you were a DC reader growing up. Thanos aside, how familiar with the Infinity Gauntlet series, big crossover event for Marvel had you been? This would have been 1991, I believe.
No, right around that time I was starting to read Batman comics. I mean, I was huge into Archie comics. I definitely wasn't reading these Marvel comics, and it wasn't until the films that I started to explore what led up to this crisis.
Yeah, so this was probably I want to say 4 or 5 years after I began truly reading and collecting comics. I began in the mid 80s. And I would say that, and I remember buying as many of these as I could in their first run issues, the single issues. And so for me, I would say right now, this is one of the more definitive examples of how Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige specifically being the guy who's sort of shepherded this entire franchise for all of those 10 years as the producer. I would say Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, the screenwriters, and certainly Anthony and Joe Russo, the directors. I feel like this is where they have made comics better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I would say, because this is one of the, it's so funny listening to comic fanboys and fangirls online, and how gatekeeping they can be, and how you've screwed this up, or how this is different from that, and et cetera, et cetera. If you've never read the Infinity Gauntlet series,
Are you about to shame us?
I'm not going to shame. I'm not going to shame you. But Jim Starlin was the writer. Of course, the great George Perez.
Wow.
Was the Keelich Ron Lim, the artists. The story is a mess.
Okay.
In the way that only comic books can get away with. If the story had been the same in the movies, people would have said, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." Because this is one of those examples where they have decided to combine every character in the known Marvel universe into a single crossover event, and it's just sort of all over the place. And in the course of 6 issues, you're introduced to, well, not introduced. You're.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. It's common in comic books, these crossover events, these big crises when anything goes, and I think it's really hard to translate that to the screen. Well, and I'd say, like, as much as I love DC and Batman, something that they've not been able to do is carry over this idea that you can have someone in Gotham City trying to find the Riddler and know that there's Green Lantern and there's Superman, and that there are these bigger universes. There's bigger events and terrible things and terrible threats happening. How are these things going to coexist? How are you going to really care about this town of Gotham, the city of Gotham, when you've got these kind of bigger events happening?
Yeah.
And I think that Marvel figured out how to translate some of that mishmash and that chaos and that coexistence into a cohesive story.
Yeah, they figured out how to whittle it down. Yeah, because this is primarily an Avengers story,
Right.
and sort of Avengers adjacent story. The original Infinity Gauntlet saga, you had Silver Surfer, which means Galactus certainly was in there somewhere. Adam Warlock is a huge character in the Infinity Gauntlet saga, and he's only been hinted upon in the MCU so far, and that was in the second Guardians of the Galaxy tag. It was a tease at the end of the movie that there's going to be a character named Adam, and this character was pivotal in the Infinity Gauntlet saga. And it turns out Thanos wasn't even really the ultimate big bad in the Infinity Gauntlet saga. Like it's hard to believe that and you might actually, Drea, be surprised who it was. I'm not going to tell you, because if there are listeners who want to go and read the Infinity Gauntlet saga, I know it's available in trade paperback. It was 6 issues, and then it spawned, it was so popular, it spawned the Infinity War after that, and then Infinity Crusade after that. I would recommend reading them if you're into big crossover events. This would have been huge in the early 90s, but as a story, it's all over the place. And I just appreciate how this Marvel Studios team has been able to boil it all down to what is essential, what is important. And they have really capitalized, I think, on just a wonderful team.
Yeah, it's clear to me that this isn't about squeezing in every character that people will recognize and everything that those characters have done, but how are these characters going to build relationships and interact? And I'm noticing the details from nearly 10 years back, how you have, now we're really getting into the film, Thanos interacting with Iron Man in a nuanced way, because Thanos, I mean, wouldn't really know who Iron Man is, but hints that he knows of him.
Sure.
Or is aware of him. There's hints of the multiverse with that statement. There's ways in which the dialogue is rich and has meaning, but isn't just everything thrown in to overwhelm us. And I noticed in this film, which we need to get into at some point, is that this is, I said to you, I think the better film is probably going to be Endgame, now that we're really taking a deeper dive. But what I appreciate about Infinity War is that you have these moments with groups of characters. I don't want to say teams, because they come together in unlikely ways. But on Titan, you have Iron Man, Spider-Man, and most of the Guardians. At some point on Earth, you had, earlier than that, you had Doctor Strange and Hulk and Iron Man together. There's several, I'd say there's maybe 3 or 4 main planets or locations that you're visiting, but you have these interactions with teams or with groups of people that I would say maybe is more meaningful than, hey, let's throw everybody together and have just have chaos. Let's have enough. Let's have small enough groups where you have meaningful dialogue and you have important things happen. And ultimately, those groups never come together in this film. There's a big event at Wakanda where you see many characters and heroes come together, but still, not everybody is there.
Yeah. I have a feeling this is going to be a very Thanos-dominated episode, so I want to hold off on him for now. I want to touch on Tony Stark first. I realize he's not the first character we see in the film, and that's going to be a heartbreaking moment for you, I'm sure, to talk about. But I want to ask about Tony Stark because we began this entire franchise with Tony and the first Iron Man film. This movie lends credibility and validation to everything Tony has gone through since I would say, at the very least, Avengers, the first Avengers film, where, and you said that there's really no reason for Thanos to really know who Tony Stark is. I actually disagree. I mean, Tony is the one guy who flew through the portal with a missile and blew up the ship that ultimately prevented
I think
them
what I
from
meant by
getting
that is that he recognized him and knows of him, but doesn't really know about him in the way that people on Earth know about him.
Yeah.
Like Tony isn't a big deal.
I would say, well, you're probably right. I think Thanos probably looks down on Tony, but I think Thanos, in that moment, I think we sense that Thanos genuinely looks at Tony as a formidable,
like sees
foe,
him as a threat,
as someone who is highly intelligent and certainly has a bit in a completely different, and I realize that now I'm jumping forward, but look at the juxtaposition between the way he acknowledges Tony and says, "Oh, I know who you are," but then looks surprised when Steve Rogers actually holds off the Infinity Gauntlet
right
for as long as he does. Like, he genuinely, like, he doesn't know who Cap is. He clearly doesn't know who Cap is. And he's there's a moment in his face of, well, how are you doing this? Now, it's just a very fleeting moment,
Sure.
but we see that Cap is clearly the strongest of all of them physically, and with his will is able to hold this gauntlet back for a couple of seconds. But it's not the same acknowledgement that Thanos gives to Tony in that moment where he says he knows. Are you
saying that there's a respect that he has for Tony?
100%.
A sense of, not that they're equals, but that, you know, if I were to dip into Thanos's brain, Thanos thinking, you know, I have this ultimately I have a vision and I have this idea and I'm executing it.
He doesn't have the vision yet.
Oh God. But he has this mission, and he sees Tony as someone who might have the capacity to stop him, not just get in his way, but to overpower him with his strategy, to overpower him with his brilliance, and that concerns him. But ultimately, Thanos does not kill Iron Man.
Right. I think he thinks he does. I think he believes that Iron Man is dead when he stabs Tony, because
that he's left him to die.
He does make there was a small moment sort of eulogizing him where he basically says, "Look, I respect you, and when this is all over," because I don't think he ever really views Tony as being a genuine threat to his cause. I know that he believes in the inevitability of his success. So I don't think he genuinely views Tony as a threat, but I think he has a significant amount of respect for him because of Avengers, because of a man who has been willing to sacrifice himself to win, and to, like, he single-handedly, if you want to really break it down, he single-handedly decided to grab that missile and direct it up into space, past the portal, into the Chitauri mothership, regardless of all the other fighting that was happening down below. No matter what Thor was doing, or Hulk, or Black Widow, or Hawkeye, or Cap, one guy is the one who took down the Chitauri army that was eventually going to rule Earth. And that's Tony Stark, knowing full well that it was going to be a one-way ticket. And I think Thanos not only knows it, but respects it. And I still think he thinks he's going to win, but I think he respects that. But I want to ask about Tony, because this is validation, right? We've seen him go through the sort of PTSD moments. We've seen him have the nightmares of the Battle of New York, and his overwhelming need to protect the Earth at all costs which ultimately is ended up biting them all in the butt every time he seems to try. But if he could build a shield around the Earth, he would do it for the Earth. He loves the planet that much. And it seems like none of the other characters fully appreciate that same vision that Tony has had ever since the Battle of New York. And now, the moment that Stephen Strange comes to him and Pepper Potts out in the park and says, I need your help, and then basically says, look, this is what you've been fearing all this time. I would say that Tony's validated, right? Would you?
I guess, validated in the sense that what he's been anticipating is finally here.
Yeah.
He's ready for it.
Like, I guess I'm saying it's not a delusion. It's not a.
Oh, I see.
It's not an irrational fear.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's not as if he's been bottling up or holding on to
an irrational
worries,
phobia,
like that he's
of
preoccupied with something that isn't real, which
yeah.
I'm sure people have tried to convince him out of or reassure him. We're powerful. We've got the Avengers. We'll manage. That he's always had in the back of his mind. This nagging, perpetual concern, this worry, this deep worry about Earth being attacked and him not able to protect it. And it's finally happening. And there might be an essence of adrenaline about this, a readiness for action, a feeling like this is for me. This is what I'm meant to do. Like, he knows he's up for it.
Because we've seen
this spirit about him that he knows that this is his task.
Yeah, because we see it in the moment where Pepper ultimately says, look, you're not ready to have children. You're not ready to have a family because you're not ready to give up Iron Man.
Right.
And he lies to himself, not just to her, but himself. He says, look, I just built this as a contingency. I built it as a possibility, just in case. You never know. When really that his trigger finger is probably pretty itchy because he's constantly vigilant about this impending invasion that he is just certain is going to come again in his lifetime. And in that moment, he says, look, I would give it up. And she doesn't believe him. And then that's when Stephen Strange shows up and it's like, no, I need your help. I need you to come help us. And I can't
He's still
help.
divided. And when Thanos sends a ship to get one of the stones, and we definitely will talk about the collection, the collection of these stones. But Tony gets essentially, beamed up into this ship, and that's where he has this conversation with Pepper, where she's realizing, here you go again. You're off to war. You're off to this conflict. You're biting off more than you can chew. You're putting yourself on the line. Again, she's not saying I don't matter. I think she's saying you're simply not ready for a family. And she makes a lot of sacrifices for him. We don't revisit this until the next film, but I think that's an important divide to acknowledge, that in order for him to be fully present and to be able to do what he does, and at this point nearly give it all up to fight Thanos, because after all, it is humanity. It is pretty much his family that he's trying to protect, his future family, his existing family, his Avengers family. He believes that risk is worth it. And that divide becomes much clearer to him as he gets beamed onto the ship. That's what he's meant to do.
Let's look on the other side of the Civil War groupings. Let's look at Cap for a second. Cap now becoming a bit of a long-haired hippie. a bearded long-haired hippie.
I don't hate
it. His uniform. He's had a custom uniform made. It's now lost all color. It's just like straight up navy blue, black. He's still got the star and the emblem there, but it's all monochrome. It's all.
So where was he? Was he in exile? Was he hiding?
Yeah, he was in exile. He was all of the above. He fled. He broke all of the people, his team out of their under-oceanic, sub-oceanic prison.
He violated so many
laws
that he released his buddies, and he took Bucky to Wakanda to get healed, deprogrammed essentially. So he's doing a lot of rogue things.
Bucky's now the White Wolf.
With Cap, this is a character we get more of in the next film. He rejoins. I think this is a matter of like, we're here to save humanity. You've got to be a part of this.
Sort of, yeah. He rejoins. He comes back to the team. He comes out of the shadows, but ultimately, straight up says he's not apologizing. He still believes he is 100% right. If nothing else, the last couple of years have.
In a way, it's almost funny. It's not funny, but like this global terrorist,
universal
terrorist, this intergalactic terrorist that is Thanos, makes just highlights the pettiness of those accords. Not to say that the accords didn't matter, but to say almost how right Cap is. Like we're destined, or we're built, or we're engineered to protect the world and maybe other worlds. And how dare you try to limit me or have me
from
sign
blowing up buildings in collateral
how dare
damage.
You make me sign papers that are for mostly for the control of me. Now I agree with you. They should not be blowing up buildings and sacrificing people. But it does make me think about the smallness and the meaning of those accords.
Well, then what happens instantly? Rhodey is taking a conversation with the council. The council, of course, including Thunderbolt Ross, rest in peace. And when told to arrest Cap and his team, Rhodey's like, yeah, I'm on it. And then instantly sort of hangs up on Ross and then says that's a court-martial. So the accords aren't even a lasting thing at this point. The accords lasted. And I think this is where I am troubled. I'm bothered by the movie franchise. Is nothing really ever seems to, even though you're introducing characters that go through and themes that kind of go through, nothing really lasts in this franchise. It's like the accords only existed for Civil War.
That's real. That's like the comics too.
Yeah, and we never revisit the accords. The accords they're at no point in time are they revisited after Civil War. The repercussions of like, well, the team split up. We don't talk anymore.
Well, I think the importance here is the psychology of the reconciliation, which is kind of not that big to me. Like, Cap returns to help his friends. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think these events, again, I think the meaning of the accords is still there, like the aspect of the accords, but the reality and how the accords really matter now, in the political landscape of superheroes. You're right. They become less impactful. They're not. It was
really a single plot point once. Yeah. And now it's been thrown away.
Well, and again, I think this theme or the central idea of this film renders those accords, or at least the conflict around the accords, somewhat minute or somewhat marginal compared to some of the bigger concepts and conflicts that we're going to have. I do want to mention, because the people that Cap comes to help and rescue are Scarlet Witch and Vision. And I know people have complained about how little they got in terms of their relationship, that particular relationship really building and becoming a thing.
I have a real, I'm one of those
you're
people.
one of those people.
It
seems kind of fragile. Like, wait, when we open up on these two already in love with each other.
They talked about having been in bed together. And I don't see it. I feel like it's a totally unearned, like, I think they made googly eyes at one another once during Civil War. And up to that point, it had just been the moment in the campus where Vision was tasked with guarding her, but and then she threw him through multiple floors.
Right.
I didn't get any romantic sparks
somewhere
at that
between
moment.
The films. They formed a romantic and personal bond.
Yeah.
And it's too bad that wasn't that we didn't really get the building of that. But I don't mind so much, because I think that what's happening next is, you mentioned this kind of being the story of Tony Stark, and I think for me, what's happening here is this is the story of people who...
You're talking about the franchise as a whole.
Kind of, but specifically toward
movie.
the end here, or the next two films here, maybe the last several films, is that this is about people who are very fragmented and learning to kind of build their own self-actualization and come to care about one another in a meaningful way, and have to sacrifice that.
Sure.
Have to make certain decisions that impact their ability to be with one another. And for these two, they're really, they form a really central part. If we think of Thanos as the villain, these two are the heroes. They're some of the most powerful people in the Avengers, and they have the thing that Thanos ultimately wants.
Yeah.
And so that's I think that's the dynamic. But I totally get it. People feel like this came out of nowhere, that it suddenly exists, and I think buy it.
If you're willing to do a prequel story for Black Widow, I'm not entirely sure, and don't get me wrong, I loved WandaVision, and I loved it being a post-Endgame story and getting her trauma and how she deals with her trauma and all that. But you also could have very easily spent an entire season taking us back to this story and how all of this happened and the adventures that happened, that it ended up in a relationship that I feel is meant to make us all sort of invoke the goals meme. Like we're all supposed to believe that I need a love like Vision and Wanda, and I'm like, I never saw it. I never saw the love between Vision
you're not
and
a
Wanda.
believer.
The only time I saw it was after Vision was dead, and she mourned him a whole lot and tortured people in the process. I wanted to see more of the actual relationship. Now, that being said, I get they're in a relationship, so now I understand you really need, and I think ultimately it was a plot-driven thing. I think they're in a relationship in the comics, so I guess they felt the need to do it. But you've also got one of the most powerful of the Avengers, and really of any human being on the planet, in Wanda.
Right.
You've got to have her protecting Vision, and ultimately have her destroying the Mind Stone. Yeah.
We are completely glossing over the fact that there are major deaths in the beginning of this film. And you mentioned the impermanence of these films, and I totally agree with you. But I do.
This is a prime example of
this is a really good example. But I think, I do honor moments when they happen, and I know this came up. Gosh, like so many people were not shaming, but correcting audiences and fans who were very moved by this film, this first of the two.
What do you mean?
Like,
shaming them for what?
Like,
for actually believing that Loki died?
Not necessarily believing, but it's just a character. They're going to come back. The story of Thanos. This will be corrected. The universe will be corrected. They're not gone forever. Just that sense of like wanting to police or correct the emotions that people have.
So you're talking about throughout the whole movie, not just Loki. You're talking about the snap at the end.
Everything.
Like, come on, they've already signed on for another Black Panther.
Yeah, in that voice, especially.
Yeah.
But I want to remind people to honor the moment that the actual kind of scenes in which these things happen, to be willing to emotionally connect with the scene and with these characters and not to, like, it's the reverse. You're not pulling those characters into our world and our reality. Let's not forget, what is this about? We're immersing ourselves in their universe.
Yes,
and
they don't have
moments,
that. They don't have that information we have. They are experiencing these very real moments, so they don't have that meta information we have.
In the same way you read a comic, and you might, I don't know if you do, but sometimes I'll read comics, and I've read the comic before, and I'll get emotional or teary-eyed or be impacted by a loss or a betrayal or a death in the comic.
Pride of Baghdad.
I'm
looking at you.
And again, it's not because we're stupid. It's not because we don't know what's going to happen. It's because we have an emotional willingness to be, it's an empathy process.
Yeah.
And I just want to take a moment and honor that and appreciate that for people who still are able to get there emotionally, and not to let that judgment keep them from having those moments. Any Disney Pixar movie, you are allowed to feel, you're allowed to feel emotional. You're allowed to cry, and you turn that off. And these are not real characters. And similarly, Loki or whoever. I was really sad about Heimdall being killed by Thanos in the beginning of this movie.
Sure.
He's on the ship that essentially has the Asgardian refugees, and he decimates those refugees. In the beginning of the movie, you just have the destruction and death of all these people, all these innocent people, and he's essentially torturing Thor and ultimately kills Loki. But
here's what I don't understand about that moment. So I guess now we're kind of getting into Thanos and his motivation. He is decimating half of the population of any given planet that he comes across. And we see a flashback to Gamora's homeworld, where we see that they are literally taking half of the population and putting them on one side of the street, and the other half of the population and putting them on the other side of the street, and they're destroying one half of them. Right. Gamora's parents being in the half that gets destroyed.
Well, and I'd say too, Brian, because this is a core part of Thanos's I'd say his kind of worldview. Maybe you should kind of play that part, that audio where he's describing what this means, like why he's doing this.
To Gamora, when he's talking to Gamora.
It's really kind of an allegory, but it's about
balance. I do have that piece of audio. Yeah. I was going to play it. Oh yeah, let's play it now. All right, here you go.
I was a child when you took me.
I saved you.
No. We were happy on my home planet.
Going to bed hungry, scrounging for scraps. Your planet was on the brink of collapse. I'm the one who stopped that. Do you know what's happened since then? The children born have known nothing but full bellies and clear skies. It's a paradise.
Because you murdered half the planet.
A small price to pay for salvation.
You're insane.
Little one, it's a simple calculus. This universe is finite, its resources finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. It needs correction.
You don't know that!
I'm the only one who knows that. At least I'm the only one with the will to act on it.
Okay, so now that we understand the reasoning for it, here's my problem. He kills all the Asgardians. He doesn't kill half and he doesn't do half and half. He kills them all. So now he's just wiped out the entire Asgardian race.
He doesn't say why he does that, but my guess.
But his sidekick is like, you have been saved by that.
Yeah.
This your sacrifice has done this and this. But he's now broken his cardinal rule.
Well, is it clear that he kills everybody there?
Because they blow up the ship.
He does leave some sort. Oh, right. He does blow up the ship. I don't know why he does that, and my sense is that he deviates from his plan. There's some particular threat here. Maybe it has to do with Thor in particular.
In this particular case, he wants the Tesseract, and he knows the Tesseract is on the ship.
Actually, you make a really great point.
But that doesn't necessarily. But that doesn't mean. But that doesn't mean he's got to. Because his whole thing is, I'm going to wipe out half of the population of every species.
Yeah.
Well, you just killed all the Asgardians except Thor.
You made a really good point. He may have done that. We didn't. This is happening between the pages, but maybe he uses that to leverage. Like he threatens to kill every single one of them if they don't hand over the Mind Stone. I get them so confused. This is the Space Stone.
Yeah,
I'm never going to remember.
Space.
The Tesseract, the Space Stone. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've got to back up a little bit because Thanos is a collector.
Not the collector. He's a collector.
He's a collector.
Right.
And he's a completionist and wants all of the Infinity Stones. And there's a special gauntlet, a place
an infinity
gauntlet where he can place all the stones, and ultimately, if he collects them all, then he's able to wipe out 50% of all creatures.
I mean, let's be honest. If he collects them all, he's able to do anything he wants.
True,
and what he's decided to do is, he is going to.
And this is why I said he was an eco-terrorist, because his worldview is that he must do something pretty destructive. He must do something on a huge scale, something that most people would consider very destructive and something you can't come back from. So this is a huge step he must make, but he believes ultimately that it will curb the destruction that creatures and beings have done to the universe, namely that they've used too many resources, that they've created poverty, that they've created hunger, that they've created disease, that the overpopulation, and let me just focus on Earth because we can understand that better. As we get upwards to several billion people, that we're destroying this planet, and that everything from animals to plants to the ozone layer, they're slowly being corroded, and this kind of correction will bring back biodiversity, will bring back balance, will end or at least curb suffering of all types, and that's his set of ideas. That's his ideal world. That's his ideal universe.
He specifically says that by doing this, planets that were impoverished and couldn't maintain their populations, they go to sleep happy every night. Their bellies are now full. Yeah. They've never known what it's meant to be impoverished. Meanwhile, half of the population is gone. And by the way, we kind of see that happen later.
We can't get there yet. It does ask the question of, while his actions, like, so what his ultimately the means are really destructive, and I would say, incredibly pathological. Yet what would result is an interesting idea. You would increase a lot of good things, right? Like happiness and contentment. You decrease suffering, you decrease hunger. There would be more resources for people. You would imagine a higher quality of life for the creatures that survive. And there might be an interesting thing, which we'll deal with later, which is some kind of survival impact. I survived this big thing. Does that make me hopeful? Does that make me want to be a better person? Does that make me want to protect the people around me?
Or do you then have the survivor guilt of why was I chosen
why
to
me?
stay?
Which we definitely will get into. And the other thing that I love, kind of love about his plan is, does this make borders not non-existent, but does this make the idea of borders less important? We're no longer gatekeeping people from coming in and taking our resources. We're no longer nationalistic. We're no longer we want to be kinder. There's enough resources to go around. We will be less strict. We won't guard. We won't have these conflicts. We'll be a lot more collaborative.
It's ultimately the end of Watchmen, where it's, we were going to go to nuclear war with you, but now we understand that there's a cosmic creature threat, and we should all unite we should put aside our differences and unite against the cosmic creature. And it's the same kind of thing where we're now, we're all mourning.
Yeah. Well, and let me add one final, at least in my mind, not justification, but
justification.
No. Let me add one additional context or way to think about this too, is that the randomness of his execution is, it's dark, but it's also like, think about the ways in which currently threats to people happen sometimes in a very non-random way. So in many ways, it is the people with more resources. Like think about COVID, people who are able to access good care, better protection, support from their employers, how better, we can just run the list, right? That people who are under-resourced are less able to survive a threat. But the randomness of
people without insurance, without.
So is it absolutely appealing? No, it's horrific. But I'd say that the randomness of this means he's simply killing 50% of creatures in a non specific way.
Yeah.
It's not certain types of people. It's not certain groups of people. And as we've seen in the comics and in other ways, especially with the Accords, it's not who you are. It's just random.
So let me ask you this. And this is something I literally just thought of, and I suddenly got very excited about it. So, the whole needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. It's the trolley car situation. In this case, you're literally talking about a 50-50 split between the two tracks. What do you do? Where do you go? What how do you this? Because and I think there's the line of dialogue that Steve has where he tells Vision offers to sacrifice himself so that Thanos can't succeed. And by the way, I have problems with the Infinity Stones just in general, but because it seems like you don't need all of them in order to be able to do certain things if you have certain ones. But okay, so if Steve says we don't trade a life for a life, so we're not going to kill you just to save ourselves and protect the world, and obviously, Vision has that that logic. You've got to kill me in order to protect the billions and trillions, the infinite number of lives.
Spock sacrificed himself to
Correct.
save so many people.
Correct. The difference is Thanos does believe in trading a life for a life. He's like, well, no, I'm literally going to take half of you so that the other half can live well. And so he's now taken the trolley car situation to a new level where it's not 7 people on one side and 2 people on the other side, where you just say, oh no, we're just going to go ahead and take the 2 because it protects the 7. In this case, he's like, no, we're going to put 5 on one side and 5 on the other. Now, which side do you go for?
I mean, in the conceit is you don't choose.
It's random.
Yeah, it's random.
Well, but Thanos might choose. Like, what if in that moment, what if with the gauntlet, Thanos has specifically been like, oh, I'm specifically taking this 50%. Or did Thanos just snap and say it's all random? He's now got a glove that gives him, and the stones that give him the ability to, in that moment, make whatever decision he wants.
Right.
So we don't know if he left certain people. That's when you start having the survivor's guilt, right? You start like,
no,
why did
Thanos, are you suggesting that he has any thought process around who survives and who
I don't
doesn't?
know.
I don't think it does, to the point where I'm not even sure Thanos knows he will survive the snap.
Thanos will survive the snap. I mean, his whole thing is it's interesting what happens when, well, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to give away any spoilers for the comic.
And this is why I think this, and now those are the first several layers of Thanos. That is his worldview. These are his beliefs. He encounters or discovers or just happens to know what he needs to acquire to execute this plan. And he's scouting the universe looking for these Infinity Stones, while also destroying 50% of all planets. This is the surefire way to do it all in one snap, literally. That's what he wants to do. What's interesting is that ultimately, does this person have a compassionate heart? Is he truly interested in the well-being of all these creatures? Is he truly empathetic and wanting to minimize, if not completely eliminate suffering? Because the snap is not, people are not tortured. It's not a horrible way to die. You just disappear. You just crumble.
But some people, I mean, we hear Peter Parker say he's not feeling so good. So we don't know.
It's slight discomfort.
Oh, okay. we don't know what they're feeling on the inside.
It's not painful. It's not a horrible pain. But I think what I'm trying to say is we're meant to believe that this is a somewhat painless elimination in order to get to a better place, in order to find balance in the universe that will, I mean, think back to Ego. Ego is Chris Pratt's father, Star-Lord's father, and also seemed to have this general idea that things could be better in the universe and had this major plan. And the reason I questioned Thanos's compassion is that his decision is the kind of surefire, fast option. He doesn't think about, and it doesn't even cross his mind that there may be other solutions to ending the suffering. I mean, we don't know.
We don't know how long he's.
No, but he has these Infinity Stones that can do so many amazing, fantastical things.
Correct. Why not create more resources?
Yeah, you can end suffering in so many different ways.
No, but I think that's, and I can't believe I'm getting into the head of Thanos here.
Defend Thanos.
No, but what does it do to the population of the universe if you just provide more to them? Like, his whole thing is if you suffer for this, you will understand, you will appreciate, you will take these resources that you now have and you will use them well, as opposed to, here's some more.
Oh, gotcha. It sounds as though that a part of his worldview includes trauma.
Correct.
Like, in order for you to utilize, appreciate, and share your resources, you have to experience massive loss.
You cannot appreciate what you've got until it's gone.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's in his vision, because he never claimed that people need to experience profound loss in order for them to have balance.
But when he acquires the Soul Stone, he has to experience profound loss.
That's a good point.
In order to even get the Soul Stone. So in order to fulfill this mission, he too has to suffer. And it's interesting because and I want to be very careful about how I position this, because he genuinely hates the moment that he has to give Gamora up, that he has to throw her.
You should probably describe the soul for a soul.
So they go
concept.
to, what is it, Vormir, and they come across Red Skull, who is now this sort of cosmic being who's been punished for having touched the Tesseract in Captain America, the First Avenger. He has now been banished away to this sort of otherworldly planet where if you provide a soul for a soul, you will get the Soul Stone. So you have to sacrifice the thing you love most, the person or being you love most. It can't be like, I really love this pen, and throw the pen. Like you have to.
It has to be a meanful loss.
It has to be a meaningful loss, and it just so happens he has his favorite daughter there, stepdaughter, adopted daughter. Like he stole her. He basically kidnapped this little girl, and absolutely loved her. And you know that because of how hard it is for him to do it, and the fact that we actually see Thanos cry. He sheds tears when, not just as he throws her, but right before, even before he throws her off, acquires the Soul Stone, and later on, after he has succeeded, he ends up in the sort of other dimension where the little girl version of Gamora asks him what it cost, and he says everything. So even he is acknowledging that this is something that requires sacrifice, even if it's my own. So I've got to believe that plays, that he's walking the walk, that he it's not something he expected to do. But
and this is what makes him sort of an interesting villain, because he doesn't gain. It's not as if he's taking all the resources for himself.
Correct.
Or gaining the notoriety or reputation.
Yeah, he doesn't want to rule the universe. No. He simply wants to set the universe free, in his opinion, and then he's going to go off and live by himself peacefully. And
I think fundamentally he believes that he is the right person for it, because no other person can. He believes that the universe will not self-correct.
Yeah.
That it goes unchecked, and he has to step in, intervene, and do this thing, and that he's the only person who can do this.
And he straight up says, "I'm the only one willing to."
And
willing
that
to go
alone
the
is satisfying to him. That
Yeah.
is what he gains.
Yeah.
Is that he has the willingness, the courage, and what it takes to do this. But ultimately, he is somebody who. I think it's interesting because he can feel love, and he can feel a sense of bond with Gamora, that was authentic, that while it was abusive, he did feel something for her.
You're touching on something that made me incredibly uncomfortable in the theaters. It still makes me uncomfortable, and I think it's sort of the source of where a lot of people got angry. A lot of people got really, really angry over the treatment of Gamora in this film, because we see that she was a child that was basically stolen. We saw that she was abused. She and her sister were abused throughout their entire lives, and then you literally toss her away.
Yeah.
And
she becomes an accessory. She becomes dehumanized, all these terrible things.
But, and this is what I want to be careful about how I position it. Like, this movie is so complex that it says, even for those who are victims of abuse, it doesn't necessarily mean the abuser doesn't have feeling and love,
Right.
but they're still monsters.
Yeah.
Like, he is still a monster. There's no question about it. But you cannot deny, because even when Mantis can be inside, she understands, she feels
she's an
what he's
empath.
feeling.
She's an empath, so she can feel his feelings.
She straight up says he's mourning.
Yeah.
So it's not a lie, and it's not surface level.
Right. And this is where, people will say, well, this is a psychopath and he's sadistic and all this. And we have to pause because while it's not clear cut,
Yeah.
he does have remorse. He does feel regret. He does feel a sense of loss. He does feel connected to some people, not many people.
I don't know if he has remorse or regret, but he does feel lost.
The remorse, the remorse and regret is I'm loosely categorizing that as like sadness and, and empathy. I mean, sadness for sure.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to place him in especially with other villains that we've talked about who completely lack empathy or are and let's break that down a little bit, because we've talked about narcissists, we've talked about psychopaths. I don't know if I've ever talked about something called the Dark Triad. Have we ever talked about that?
That sounds very familiar to me, actually. But why don't you refresh?
Yeah, so it's
listeners?
It's very real. The Dark Triad refers to 3 specific, enduring, deep personality traits that can co-occur. And this is very, very rare. We're talking like 1% of the population or less. But essentially, the Dark Triad posits that 3 specific personality traits, when they co-occur and coexist together in a person, can create a very malevolent personality profile. And it consists of narcissism. So, of course, narcissism is a very enduring sense of ego and grandiosity, lacking empathy, somebody that is just out for themselves, which I think we see some of this. We don't see, this isn't like, when we talked about Loki, we talked about someone who outwardly is acting as though they are deserving of attention, and that they, outwardly believe that they're better than others, but internally really do suffer from self-doubt and are quite fragile. This isn't that kind of narcissism. I think Thanos's narcissism isn't that fragile, vulnerable type. His narcissism is simply, I believe I am right for this. I'm the person for this, and no one else has what it takes to follow through. But he has a sense of narcissism. He has the sense, again, we talked about the idea that he believes that his plan, his worldview is the right one. And that's where the narcissism really plays out. There may be other ideas, other theories, other solutions, and he's not willing to entertain them because he believes his solution is the right solution. And it's almost like, you might know more than I will, but like a military leader.
About narcissism?
No.
Oh.
About military leaders who are almost sort of stuck in a particular worldview and will do a lot of inhumane things to land there, to really kind of pursue.
I can think of one off the top of my head. No.
Okay.
But here's what's interesting is he's clearly lived a long time. He's clearly had this plan for a long time. He's clearly seen a lot of things. In his mind, he has seen other worlds try and fail. And so, and when he says, I'm the only one who can do it, it's not like Batman. I believe Batman is falling under that narcissist blanket where he believes he's the only one who can do it. Whereas Thanos at this point has simply said, you know what? There is literally no one else in this universe who is willing to go the mile I'm willing to go to make this happen. And I'm going to save all these people, and I'm going to, I'm going to do it.
I mean, I'd say the narrowness of that, the fixation of that is the narcissism. This fundamental fixed belief that this is the right thing to do.
So even if he did, even in the moment that he throws Gamora off the cliff,
Yeah.
even if in that moment he decided, you know what, this isn't worth it, maybe there's another way, the narcissism is what would force him to just carry that out.
Well, let me cover the other two personality traits because it might be another one.
Oh, okay.
So that's the first personality trait, narcissism. The second one is Machiavellianism.
Oh, sure.
This is, and this might be familiar to you because lots of
Why am I familiar with all these things?
Well, you're more of a history buff.
I've read The Prince. Machiavelli's The Prince.
There are figures in our history, in our real history,
Yes.
that have demonstrated that some people will use manipulation in order to, follow their self-interest. So this is the absence of morality. This is the callousness. This is somebody who is willing to sacrifice other people. They have just a huge sense of exploitation.
Yeah.
And they'll do what it takes. They'll do just about anything to reach their outcome, the outcome that they see. And I think there's some of that in him, that fixation, the willingness to sacrifice the single person that he cares about. And then the third trait is psychopathy. So this is something we've talked about. This is antisocial behavior, the impulsivity, the unemotional traits. This is the serial killer who will simply just do terrible, horrific things without remorse. And I actually don't think he has psychopathy in the sense that, like, how can you say that? He's killing all these people. Well, he's doing it under those other two profiles, under those other two visions. He's not doing it because he wants to cause harm. He wants to manipulate and terrorize and torture people. He's not interested he's actually interested in the opposite. He does not want to create suffering. He wants to be bigger than that. He wants to end suffering. And so he's caught up in his own worldview, his own idea. I don't really think he's meeting the criteria of having a personality profile of someone with the Dark Triad. I think he's, as I've thought about this, and I've been thinking about this a lot, he kind of falls under almost like a cult leader profile in a way. I was just about to say, and you know more about this than I do.
You have definitely watched more stuff on cults than I have.
Yeah, we both are pretty read up on our cult leaders.
Our cults.
But as I was watching this film, I was like, this isn't really a psychopath. This is kind of a cult leader.
It's another ideologue.
Yeah, like someone who fundamentally believes in something that the rest of the people think, most people believe are so bonkers and just so out there and unimaginable. And he truly is just surrounding himself by this by his own justification, and again willing to do pretty bonkers things in order to to get to this final solution. And the finality of it makes me feel like he's a cult leader. Like all of this leads to a final destination, much like who's the Heaven's Gate guy. There was Heaven's Gate where they were waiting for that ship to come take them, and he convinced people to suicide. There's of course Jim Jones, David Koresh, Charles Manson, who probably had some psychopathic tendencies actually, but most of the cult leaders that we're familiar with are kind of like this in terms of their psychology.
Yeah. It's literally, like we've said before, ideologies and being so stuck in your ideology might be one of the most dangerous possible things for not just yourself, but for everyone around you and maybe the world at large.
I mean, what he doesn't have is an interest in having followers necessarily. Like, he's not looking for that sort of godlike quality that a lot of cult leaders have.
He makes deals. He rents armies to go take over planets so that he can get the power stones, but he's not interested in like amassing. In fact, he even says when I think he believes that he's probably killed Tony, he even says straight up, I hope they remember you. You know, like it's this kind of, he's not saying like, oh, your people, the ones who survive are going to worship me. He says, I hope they remember you to Tony. Yeah. And, it's a nice moment actually.
Boy, you really like that interaction.
I think that interaction is huge. It's a huge moment. I mean, for starters, it's when everyone else gets dusted away, everybody but Tony, including Doctor Strange, who I guess we'll have to talk about the next time.
I mean, I think as we wrap up the what I would consider an analysis or kind of a profiling of Thanos, he really isn't fitting a single box with that. And that's probably more realistic. You know, he's got some narcissism. He certainly has that Machiavellian type trait in that he's willing to do a lot of terrible things to kind of get to his solution. He's definitely objectifying other people. People are objects to be used, to be manipulated. They're personal gain for him. But at the same time, he is showing an interest in, or at least an understanding and what you called a respect for other people's humanity, being and existence. Mm-hmm. That for the time that they are on Earth, or for the time that they are alive until the snap, it's not as if he renders life meaningless. It's not as if he thinks these people don't have value. It's just that he wants less of them so that their value and their meaning can make sense. Mm-hmm. And won't be diminished by some other threat. It's almost like there's going to be some threats in your world, in your universe. Let me eliminate them by being your first and only threat. Mm-hmm. There you go.
And now I'm going to walk away. Like, you'll never see me again. I'm just going to go away.
The most interesting scene is where we see Thanos
at the end. The very end.
And I mean, how would you describe that emotion? There isn't dialogue. We see him kind of settle on watching the horizon on some remote landscape. It's very quiet. Like, how would you capture that emotion he's feeling?
Well, there's certainly accomplishment. He's done.
Yeah.
He's done everything he wants. And again, it's not for the power, because it's not like he did it and then decided he's not ready to retire. He's got to go do more stuff. He is content, but he is also going through a lot, because again, he just gave up Gamora, and I think he understands. I think the difference between Thanos and someone who might have the psychopathy is Thanos knows that he has killed all these people, or eliminated all these people. I don't think he's not. I don't think he's blind to that fact. I think he's fully aware that he has done this horrible thing, but he believes that it needed to happen. And so I think within him, and I don't know, maybe we'll see it going forward. To be perfectly honest, I don't fully remember the very beginning of Endgame well enough to know how conflicted he is, but
I don't think he's conflicted at all.
Well, no, I mean in the aftermath.
Okay.
I mean not conflicted. I mean, like, does this eat away at him over the years? And if it does, not that he regrets having done it, But
But is there some kind of residual?
yeah, is there residual like pain and suffering from being the one? Like if it's someone who says, "Look, I know there's a hell, and I know I'm going there,
Yeah.
but I had to do it." You know, like
It's certainly clear to me that at the end of the film, he has a very authentic sense of contentment. Like he's content in that moment. There's a very, I would say, like a smile.
Oh, sure.
There's a moment of peace.
that's what I'm saying is the accomplishment, the
Yeah.
feeling of the accomplishment.
It's the accomplishment, but it's also it's almost as if he has internalized the balance that he's created.
Yes.
It's sitting with that immense universal balance and knowing that he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. He's unburdened by the chaos and destruction of the universe.
Yeah.
He's made peace.
Yeah.
It's a wild idea. I mean, it's completely irrational, but it's one that he completely aligns with. I've made peace in the universe and I'm satisfied now, and I'm going to just kind of
And I guess
live
that's
my days out.
That's the philosophical argument, though. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but is it irrational? If you know that there's a Thanos out there and that he could do anything you want, would you suddenly be different? Like, would you suddenly, because now you are starting to this is where like sort of if you didn't believe in a God before, you certainly believe in one now. Like there's certainly, and he's a malevolent God. He's a guy who will snap his fingers and dust you away if he doesn't like, would you suddenly change your being? And now if you're talking about worlds all over the universe doing the exact same thing because they know that there is this potentially malevolent, godlike being who, if he's not pleased, could happen, all this stuff could happen. Maybe he does create peace in the universe. Like maybe it doesn't happen instantly because you're still mourning, but who's to say that after generations of this,
Well,
there wouldn't have been problems.
look,
Or,
you're not going to like what I have to say.
well, I mean, I don't dislike what you have to say.
What I have to say is that there isn't a Thanos, but there's a Thanos. Like, there isn't a Thanos-like being. And by the way, no, I wouldn't consider that a god. It would be an alien with a lot of power.
Well, I'm saying, but in the same, I mean, who's to say it's? I
mean,
it's
relative.
not all the same thing.
Sure,
Like
sure.
If you're a peon, where a being from another, and you have no idea if they're watching you, you have no idea what they're doing.
The truth is, by the way, is that most people, aside from the handful of Avengers and the soldiers on Wakanda, and then
They have no idea what's happening.
Yes, like most people on Earth are completely unaware of Thanos as a being,
Right.
And all of a sudden, and we're getting into territory that leads into the next episode of which is Endgame, or sorry, in 2 episodes, which is Endgame.
3
But-
episodes. Because
but
we've got
the-
Ant-Man and the Wasp,
Oh,
then we
gosh.
have Captain Marvel, then we have
Oh
Endgame.
God. Okay. Well, I think I'm agreeing with you when I say that most people on Earth and in the universe that were impacted by this don't know about Thanos as a being. So suddenly we're impacted by this massive trauma.
Yeah.
And they have to explain it the best way they can explain it. So they don't know Thanos as a being. There's no god. There's no like Thanos type creature that they can blame. They have to make meaning of this sudden trauma that they've never experienced before, or don't know anything about.
But you know what I just thought about? We think about the fact that he's, for as long as Gamora and Nebula can remember, he's been looking for the stones, but they've also been helping him destroy half the population of every planet. That's basically him just testing the hypothesis, right? Because if he only wanted the stones so that he could wipe out half the population of the universe, he wouldn't go to the trouble of wiping them out now.
No, but I think that's why I described him as a military leader or somebody who is kind of experimenting with the small scale.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
He's experimenting. He's testing the hypothesis. He wants to know.
And it worked
that
on
this
Titan.
Yeah.
Now remember, he talks about his own planet of Titan and how eliminating 50% of the community actually improved the planet.
Yeah.
And so now he can do it on a larger scale.
Yeah.
Which is less work.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying is it's almost like we think of it as this just this quest to find all the gems, and
but I mean, but the snap of the finger is there's something to that, right?
Sure.
It's instant. It's more humane. I'm saying that with context, right? It's simultaneous. So you don't have waves of this thing happening where people are terrified. It just happens in a blink.
Yeah.
And that is in many ways a part of this trauma. It's not something that occurs over a long, enduring period of time like war or like hunger or like COVID. Again, there's something particularly, I don't know, he truly is kind of wrapped up in his martyr idea, but there's some truth to this balance. There's some truth to this piece.
You know what's interesting too is just cosmically. Mm-hmm. It'd be one thing if he snapped his finger. You said instantaneous and simultaneous. It's not simultaneous. It does
within seconds.
Sure, but that's what I'm saying is like. Isn't it weird that cosmically something is going over each person and being like, no, not you, not you, not you. Okay, now you, like the fact that
it takes some time. It's sort of like an earthquake. Like,
but it's the
not everyone
Infinity
feels it at
Stones.
the
Like,
same
could
time.
it not be instant? Like, could those people not suddenly all dissolve at the same time? Now, look.
It's a story.
Look,
we need it,
that's
we
what I'm
need
saying.
it
I'm fully aware that what you need is for this to happen. But what I'm saying is, and you could say that at certain moments it might be simultaneous, but we're looking at different moments happening at different places. So we, blah blah blah. But no. Nick Fury goes.
Several seconds after.
Yeah, like she's
Maria.
Yeah, Maria's gone, and then he's got enough time to feel it happening, pull out his little pager to call Captain Marvel, and then go away. And the person who was in the truck has already gone before she even gets hit. So
it's almost like a wave.
Yeah. That's what's terrifying.
But it does happen within a minute or two. Everything is done. Everything is done in a moment. And we do have to wrap the show and not get too much into Endgame. But I will say that the witnessing of the people around you be wiped away is
that's what I'm saying.
Horrible.
That's what I'm saying. That's where the sort of the survivor guilt comes in too. It was like, why was the person I was just standing next to turned into ash, but I wasn't?
The terror of this is real.
And could it happen to me tomorrow?
Yes, the
a week from
uncertainty of this, what the language we are about to use, it should be familiar. Will it happen to me? Who does it happen to? How do I understand this?
Yeah.
Why so many people?
Yeah.
Especially for the folks that don't know what's going on, but just kind of focusing specifically on the Avengers to see those moments happen. This really, the end of the film really is a huge part of the psychology of Infinity War. They've been fighting so hard to prevent a thing from happening and they failed.
Yeah.
He snaps his fingers and they watch their best friends and companions and the people that they bonded with literally disappear, crumble into ashes. Mm-hmm. And the sequence of that is such a sad moment. It's a terrible thing. I hated watching it. I hated watching it in the theater in the sense that it was so overwhelmingly sad. Mm-hmm. And when we watched it again, to think of certain people, Rocket, for instance, he loses Groot.
Again.
It's so sad. And he doesn't know this yet, but all the other Guardians also are destroyed.
Yeah.
He's the single Guardian left. To see some of the characters that we've been following just disappear is a powerful thing. And again, you'll hear people say, well, we know some of them come back, or we know the comics, or we know nothing is really permanent in these things, but it doesn't take away from that immense feeling of sadness for the fictional characters that are experiencing that in the moment.
You know what's really weird?
What?
The snap took Bucky's arm. Not even.
You'd think that the arm would just drop.
It would just fall down. But then I guess all
it's
clothes
vibranium.
Would have to just drop.
That's right. Their whole being, everything they are just disappears.
The arm goes.
That's weird.
Anyway, because I was thinking that could be the moment where Rocket's like, told you I was going to get that arm.
Really sick.
Just take that arm. All right, Dre, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
Please, please, please check back in when we cover Endgame, because there's plenty to talk about. But
you're talking about me, because I'll be here for that conversation.
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, and on socials with the moniker Arkham Asylum Doc.
And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at bward028, on Instagram at b_ward028. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. You can email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. And you can find us on Facebook. Be sure to follow our family over at Fanbase Press and join our Patreon, where you can get your shout outs, you can get videos like the one we just posted. Drea just did an unboxing of the new fossil watch for the Batman, and that just went up to our $7 a month patrons. And you can get all other kinds of cool stuff there, like our challenge coins from 2020, which are almost out. Until next time, though, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Families can be tough.